now 12. I'm still married and I love my wife dearly.
From the descendants of Al Capone's bloodline, yes, the Chicago outfit legend, who have quietly slipped into normal lives.
Well, sir, have you ever been connected with the Mafia at any time?
Never.
To the Genevese family's powerful dynasty, whose members now live low-profile lives across the U.S. and Europe. These are the families of Mafia bosses today. The Chicago outfit. No discussion of American organized crime would be complete without talking about the legacy of the Chicago outfit, the criminal organization that dominated the Windy City for nearly a century. This powerful syndicate, built during the Prohibition era, became synonymous with American organized crime. In a rare recording that gives us insight into the man behind the myth, we can hear the Mafia family's boss himself speaking about his life and motivations.
I came to Chicago with $40 in my pocket. My son is now 12. I'm still married and I love my wife dearly.
This personal glimpse reveals a side of the outfit that the public rarely saw, an organization run by men who, despite their violent reputation, spoke with genuine affection about their families.
We had to make a living. I was younger than I am now and thought I needed more. I didn't believe in prohibiting people from getting the things they wanted.
During the height of Prohibition, Capone built a criminal empire that controlled much of Chicago's illegal alcohol trade, gambling operations, and protection rackets. His organization was responsible for the infamous St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929, which shocked the nation and cemented Capone's reputation as America's most feared gangster. But behind the headlines and the violence was a family man who genuinely loved his wife and son. Capone was married to Mae Josephine Coughlin, and together they had one son, Albert Francis Sonny Capone, born in 1918. What makes the Capone family story particularly poignant is how Sonny Capone deliberately chose a path completely opposite to his father's. In that same recording, we hear Capone's views on Prohibition, which drove his criminal enterprise.
I thought Prohibition was an unjust law, and I still do.
After Al Capone's 1931 conviction, his family faced major challenges. His son, Sonny Capone, born with congenital syphilis likely from his father, chose a quiet, legitimate life rather than following in Al's criminal footsteps. Sonny Capone moved to California, where he lived under an assumed name for much of his adult life, working legitimate jobs and raising a family far from the spotlight that had consumed his father. He had 4 daughters, Veronica, Teresa, Patricia, and Barbara. These women, Al Capone's granddaughters, represent one of the most interesting examples of how the descendants of notorious criminals have chosen to engage with their family legacy. Today, the Capone granddaughters have taken strikingly different approaches to their famous ancestry. Diane Patricia Capone, one of Sonny's daughters, lives in the Bay Area of California and has chosen to actively engage with her grandfather's legacy. In 2019, she published a book titled Al Capone, Stories My Grandmother Told Me, which offers a rare, intimate glimpse into the private life of America's most famous gangster. Another of Al Capone's granddaughters, Deirdre Marie Capone, resides in Naples, Florida. In 2012, she made news when she revisited the family home in Miami Beach, where Al Capone had spent his final years after his release from prison. After the Chicago outfit, let's examine the Banano family's complex legacy. The Banano family. The Banano crime family, one of New York's 5 families, has a unique place in organized crime history. Unlike many other crime families whose leaders died violently or in prison, the Banano family was led by Joseph Banano, who lived to the remarkable age of 97, dying peacefully in 2002 in Tucson, Arizona. His longevity allowed the family to witness the entire arc of American organized crime, from its Prohibition-era origins through its golden age and into its modern decline. In a rare television interview, we get insight into Banano's relationships with other legendary crime figures. When asked about Al Capone, his response reveals the complex social dynamics within organized crime circles.
You knew Al Capone.
Oh, I happen to know him, you know.
What kind of a man?
Al Capone was a very jolly guy.
Al Capone was a jolly guy?
Jolly guy.
This characterization seems almost surreal given the reputation for violence, but it provides a glimpse into how these families saw each other within their own circles. When pressed about what was admirable about other crime figures, the answer reveals appreciation for style and presentation.
What do you find so funny, Bill?
My reaction is to your reaction. It's surprise.
Well,
I like him.
why did you like him?
For his character, for his approach, for his, the way he handled himself, the external appearance.
In another fascinating interview, we see Banano's relationship with his own mentor, Salvatore Maranzano, who was a key figure in the Castellamarese War. When asked about his first hero, Banano's response reveals both reverence and a sophisticated understanding of metaphor.
Your first hero
That's right.
was Salvatore
Maranzano.
Maranzano.
Yes.
But then you say he was said to be able to snap a man's neck with his fingers. And I say when I read that,
That's a metaphorical.
Banano was married to Faye Labruzzo and had 4 children, Salvatore, Bill, Catherine, and Barbara. His son Bill Banano became heavily involved in the family business and later wrote his own books about the Banano family's experiences. However, unlike some other crime families, no public information is available about the current whereabouts of Banano's descendants, suggesting that the family has chosen to maintain privacy in the years since Joe Banano's death. What makes the Banano family story particularly compelling is Joe Banano's decision to write his autobiography, A Man of Honor, published in 1983. This book was controversial within organized crime circles because it violated the traditional code of silence, but it provided an unprecedented inside look at the workings of a major crime family. Banano's longevity also allowed him to see the decline of the traditional mafia structure he had helped build. By the time of his death in 2002, the 5 families of New York were shadows of their former selves, decimated by federal prosecutions and internal betrayals. Banano's lifespan covered the entire arc of American organized crime's rise and fall, making him perhaps the last living link to the golden age of the American Mafia. Another significant crime family on our list occupies a unique position in the history of American organized crime: the Lucesy Family. The Lucesy crime family, led by Frank Costello, known for their sophisticated approach to corruption and their ability to operate at the highest levels of political power, was built on a foundation of intelligence over brute force. Founded in the early 20th century, the Lucesy family became one of the most powerful and influential crime organizations in American history. What made the Lucesy family different from many of their contemporaries was their preference for corruption over violence, their political connections, and their ability to present themselves as legitimate businessmen, even while running one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the country. One of the most famous moments in Costello's public life came during his appearance before the Kefauver Committee hearings in 1951. These hearings, officially known as the Senate Special Committee to Investigate Crime in Interstate Commerce, were the first major televised investigation into organized crime in American history. The hearings brought organized crime into American living rooms for the first time, and Costello became an unwitting television star. During his testimony, Costello displayed the measured, careful approach that had made him so successful in the criminal world. When asked about his contributions to American society, his response was characteristically concise and strategic.
You must have in your mind some things you've done that you can speak of to your credit as American citizens. If so, what are they? Paid my tax.
Costello was married to Loretta Gigerman, but they had no children. This absence of direct descendants means that there is no Costello family story to follow in the way we can trace the legacies of other crime bosses. However, Costello's influence on organized crime extended far beyond his immediate family, shaping the way criminal organizations would operate for decades to come. Costello's approach to organized crime, emphasizing corruption over violence, political influence over street-level intimidation, and sophisticated business practices over crude criminal enterprise, became the template that many subsequent crime bosses would follow. His understanding that the most successful criminals were those who could operate within legitimate society while maintaining their criminal enterprises influenced a generation of organized crime figures. Costello's death in 1973 marked the end of an era in American organized crime. He represented the last of the bosses who had built their power during Prohibition and maintained it through the Depression and World War II. By the time of his death, organized crime was entering a new phase, with federal law enforcement becoming increasingly sophisticated in its approach to combating criminal organizations. Next, we have one of the most ruthless and ambitious crime families in American organized crime history: the Genevese Family. The Genevese crime family, established in the early 20th century, became known for producing some of the most strategically intelligent and brutally violent leaders in organized crime. What made the Genevese family particularly dangerous was their combination of strategic intelligence, brutal violence, and overwhelming ambition to become the most powerful crime organization in America. Genevese immigrated to America as a teenager and quickly became involved in criminal activities in New York's Little Italy. He helped kill Joe Masseria in 1931, ending the Castellamarese War and shaping modern organized crime. Unlike others who stayed low-key, Genevese aggressively chased power, aiming to be the boss of all bosses. During World War II, facing murder charges in New York, Genevese fled to Italy, where he worked with the fascist government. After the war, he returned to America and resumed his criminal career, eventually becoming one of the most powerful crime bosses in the country. During his testimony before federal investigators, when directly asked about his role in organized crime, his responses were categorical and emphatic.
Is it true that you're the head of the Mafia in this country?
It is not the truth. Well, sir, have you ever been connected with the Mafia at any time?
Never.
What about the government's charge that you're the right man, that you're the #1 man in this narcotics business?
Charges are fantastic and ridiculous.
Genevese's denials continued when pressed about his knowledge of criminal activies.
Do you think
That's what they are.
And have you ever known anyone in the narcotics racket? Have you known
I
anyone?
never did.
Have you ever known anyone in the underworld?
By 1958, the federal government was becoming increasingly sophisticated in its approach to organized crime. The Kefauver hearings had exposed the extent of organized crime's influence on American society, and law enforcement agencies were developing new techniques for investigating and prosecuting criminal organizations. The Genevese family has produced multiple generations of members, but unlike the families of some other major crime figures, no public information is available about the current whereabouts of many Genevese family descendants. This absence of information likely reflects a conscious decision by the families to maintain privacy and avoid the attention that comes with bearing names associated with organized crime. Genevese died in federal prison in 1969, serving a sentence for conspiracy and narcotics trafficking. The current leadership of the Genevese family has learned from Vito Genevese's mistakes, particularly his high-profile approach to criminal leadership and his involvement in drug trafficking. The modern Genevese family is known for maintaining a low profile and adhering to traditional organized crime codes, with historically only 11 members turning informant, making it one of the most secretive and disciplined criminal organizations in America. The Gambino crime family represented a different model of organized crime leadership from many of their contemporaries. The Gambino family, known for his business-like approach to criminal enterprises and their preference for white-collar crimes over street-level violence, Paul Castellano attempted to modernize the Gambino crime family and move it away from its traditional focus on violent criminal activities. Paul Castellano was born in 1915 and became boss of the Gambino family, focusing on legitimate businesses before being assassinated by John Gotti in 1985. What made Castellano different from traditional crime bosses was his emphasis on generating income through sophisticated business operations rather than relying primarily on violent crimes and intimidation. However, Castellano's business-focused approach created tension within the Gambino family, particularly among younger members who preferred the more traditional, violent approach to organized crime. This tension ultimately led to his downfall when John Gotti organized the assassination that brought him to power and returned the Gambino family to a more violent operational model. Castellano was married to Nina Mano and had 4 children, Paul Jr., Joseph, Philip, and Constance. While Castellano ruled the Gambino family with a focus on white-collar crime, extorting the construction industry, dominating the concrete unions, and laundering money through legitimate enterprises, he also worked to shield his family from the inner workings of his criminal empire. Unlike other mob families where sons often followed in their father's footsteps, there is no public evidence that Castellano's children were ever directly involved in organized crime. Like many other organized crime families from this era, no public information is available about the current whereabouts of Castellano's family members, suggesting that they have successfully maintained privacy and distance from their father's criminal legacy. After Castellano was assassinated in 1985 outside Manhattan's Sparks Steakhouse, an event orchestrated by John Gotti, the family went almost entirely silent. After major incidents and leadership changes in the 1980s, many Gambino family members went almost entirely silent. This silence is not unusual in mafia families, particularly among those who never participated directly in criminal activities. Some reports suggest that descendants have attempted to run legitimate businesses, but there are few public legal records tying family members to criminal charges or investigations. However, the family's choice to remain private demonstrates that even relatively respectable involvement in organized crime carries sufficient stigma to make public engagement undesirable. The next mafia family on our list is Banano crime family. Moving from historical figures to contemporary organized crime leadership, Michael Mancuso represents the modern reality of American organized crime bosses. Currently serving as boss of the Banano crime family, Mancuso's story demonstrates how organized crime leadership has evolved in an era of sophisticated federal law enforcement and constant surveillance. Unlike past leaders who focused on broad rackets and silent power, Mancuso's reign reflects a more cautious, surveillance-aware era, yet his personal record is anything but restrained. Convicted of the 1984 manslaughter of his wife, Evelina Mancuso, he added a troubling personal layer to the family's long legacy of organized crime. Her death from a gunshot wound during a domestic dispute marked a departure from the typical business-first violence of older bosses. Mancuso's criminal career has been marked by both traditional organized crime activities and personal violence that has brought significant law enforcement attention. His involvement in the 1999 murder of Gerlando Ciascia, as revealed by former Banano boss Joseph Messino's cooperation with federal federal authorities demonstrates the continuing role of violence in modern organized crime operations. Mancuso was married to Evelina, whom he killed, and has a girlfriend mentioned in recent social media posts. The public nature of some information about Mancuso's personal life reflects the different media environment that modern organized crime figures face, where social media and digital communication create new vulnerabilities and opportunities for law enforcement surveillance. While details about Mancuso's parents and early family life are limited in public records, it is known that he came from a traditional Italian-American background rooted in the Bronx, where he was raised. His father is believed to have been a laborer, and his upbringing was reportedly modest and typical of working-class Italian-American neighborhoods in New York during the 1960s and 1970s. There are no confirmed public records of any children from his marriage to Evelina or from later relationships, though reports and law enforcement sources occasionally reference a longtime girlfriend whose identity remains undisclosed. Mancuso was sentenced to 11 months in July 2023 for violating supervised release and was likely released by June 2025, given the sentence length, and likely resides in New York. His recent legal troubles demonstrate the continuing challenges that organized crime figures face in an era of intensive federal supervision and surveillance. Let's now move to the Chicago Outfit modern era, which represents one of the most enduring and adaptable criminal organizations in American history. The Chicago Outfit modern era. From its origins during Prohibition under Al Capone through its evolution into a more subtle and sophisticated operation, the Chicago Outfit has demonstrated remarkable staying power in an era when many other organized crime families have declined or disappeared entirely. Today, the Chicago Outfit is believed to be led by Salvatore Sali di De Laurentiis, who represents a new generation of organized crime leadership. De Laurentiis is believed to be the current boss since 2021, following John DeFranzo, and is the son of former boss Joseph De Laurentiis. This dynastic succession reflects the continuing importance of family connections in organized crime, even as the nature of criminal enterprises has evolved significantly from the violent, high-profile operations of earlier eras. What makes the modern Chicago Outfit particularly interesting is how it has adapted to changing times and increased law enforcement scrutiny. The Chicago Outfit has shifted to lower-risk ventures like gambling, as noted in recent analyses, moving away from the violent rackets that once defined organized crime in Chicago. This evolution is perfectly captured in a recent interview with De Laurentiis, where he presents a remarkably different image from the traditional stereotype of organized crime figures. When asked about taking a blood oath, his response reveals how modern organized crime figures present themselves to the public.
Did you take a blood oath?
There's nobody sticking any needles in me either. That's from movies. That's from The Godfather.
It's an outfit of gamblers.
De Laurentiis continues with this theme, emphasizing the mundane, business-like nature of the modern Chicago Outfit.
Yeah, right. Right. An outfit of guys that gamble. If there were any other kind of businessmen, it would be, the Chamber of Commerce.
The reference to The Godfather in De Laurentiis' response is also significant. Francis Ford Coppola's trilogy of films, based on Mario Puzo's novel, created the popular image of organized crime that most Americans carry in their minds. By explicitly distancing himself from this Hollywood image, De Laurentiis is attempting to present organized crime as something far more mundane and businesslike than the romanticized version portrayed in popular culture. De Laurentiis is the son of former boss Joseph De Laurentiis, and he likely resides in Chicago, though no specific family details are publicly available. This privacy reflects the organization's overall approach to maintaining a low profile and avoiding the kind of media attention that has caused problems for other crime families. Let's continue our examination with perhaps the most famous organized crime family era of the modern period, the Gambino family during the Gotti years. The Gambino family, Gotti era. John Joseph Gotti Jr., known throughout the world as the Teflon Don, didn't just leave behind a criminal empire when he died in prison in 2002. He left behind a family that continues to captivate the public imagination to this day. Rising through the ranks of the Gambino crime family in the 1970s and 1980s, Gotti orchestrated one of the most audacious power grabs in Mafia history when he arranged the assassination of Paul Castellano in 1985 outside Sparks Steakhouse in Manhattan. This brazen daylight murder catapulted Gotti to the top of New York's most powerful crime family, making him not just a boss, but a celebrity. What made Gotti different from the traditional mafia bosses who preferred to operate in shadows was his flamboyant style and his relationship with the media. Dressed in expensive suits, always impeccably groomed, Gotti courted publicity in a way that horrified the old-school mobsters. He earned his nickname Teflon Don because charges seemed to slide right off him. He was acquitted in 3 major trials before finally being convicted in 1992 on charges including including murder and racketeering. But the Gotti story didn't end with John's life sentence. His family, particularly his children, have remained in the public eye in ways that would have been unthinkable for previous generations of Mafia families. John Gotti was married to Victoria DiGiorgio Gotti, and together they had 5 children: Victoria, John Angelo Jr., Frank, Angela, and Peter. The tragedy struck early in the Gotti family when young Frank Gotti was killed in a traffic accident in 1980 at just 12 years old. The driver of the car was their neighbor John Favara, who disappeared 4 months after the accident. Many believe he was murdered in revenge, though this was never proven. Today, the surviving Gotti children have taken remarkably different paths. John Gotti Jr. now resides in Oyster Bay Cove, Long Island, New York, and has successfully transitioned from his brief stint as acting boss of the Gambino family to become an author. His transformation is perhaps one of the most remarkable redemption stories in organized crime history. After serving time in prison and distancing himself from the criminal world, John Jr. has written several books and frequently appears in documentaries about his father and the Mafia world he left behind. Victoria Gotti, the eldest daughter, has perhaps embraced the family notoriety more than any of her siblings. She continues to live in New York and has become something of a media personality. Victoria has authored several books, including novels and memoirs about her experiences growing up as a mob boss's daughter. She's also produced television projects, including Victoria Gotti, My Father's Daughter, which gave viewers an intimate look into her life and her complex relationship with her father's legacy. The next family on our list is the Luciano family. Charles Lucky Luciano occupies a unique position in the pantheon of American organized crime. He wasn't just another gangster. He was the architect of modern organized crime in America, the man who literally wrote the blueprint that every subsequent generation of mobsters would follow. Born Salvatore Lucania in Sicily in 1897, Luciano immigrated to the United States as a child and grew up on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, where he would eventually reshape the criminal underworld forever. In the early 1930s, following the bloody Castellamarese War that had torn apart New York's Italian-American crime families, Luciano proposed something unprecedented: cooperation instead of competition. Joe Banano once talked about him in a rare interview, saying,
Charles Lucky, Lucky Luciano. What was his power? What was his talent? What kind of a man?
He believed to make money.
Luciano's influence extended far beyond New York. He was instrumental in founding the commission after the Castellamarese War of 1930-31, which ended the old Mustache Pete era and ushered in modern organized crime. His innovations included the establishment of the 5-family structure in New York, the creation of operational hierarchies that insulated bosses from direct involvement in crimes, and the development of cooperative relationships with non-Italian criminal organizations. In 1946, Luciano was deported to Italy, where he spent the remainder of his life until his death in Naples in 1962. This deportation marked the end of one of the most influential criminal careers in American history, but it also began one of the most mysterious chapters in the story of organized crime families. Unlike the Gottis or the Capones, whose family members have maintained public profiles and shared their stories, the descendants of Lucky Luciano have remained largely in the shadows. Luciano was married to Igea Lissoni, though they later divorced, and he had siblings, but specific details about his family are sparse. This scarcity of information isn't accidental. It reflects both the different era in which Luciano operated and the different approach his family has taken to dealing with his legacy. What we do know is that Luciano's family immigrated to the United States in 1906, settling in New York, where young Salvatore would eventually become Charles Lucky Luciano. His siblings and their descendants have apparently chosen to maintain their privacy, avoiding the spotlight that has followed other organized crime families. Luciano's deportation to Italy also created a unique situation for his family. Unlike other crime bosses who died in America, surrounded by their families and communities, Luciano spent his final 16 years in exile. The mystery surrounding Luciano's descendants also reflects the different media landscape of his era. Luciano operated during the 1920s and 1930s, before the age of television and modern celebrity culture. His family wasn't subjected to the same level of scrutiny that later generations of crime families would face. This allowed them to more easily disappear into legitimate society without the constant reminder of their family connection to organized crime. Our list ends with Sicilian Cosa Nostra family. The Sicilian Cosa Nostra represents the original and most enduring form of organized crime, emerging in western Sicily during the mid-19th century. Unlike the romanticized portrayals in popular culture, the Cosa Nostra developed as a pragmatic response to Sicily's chaotic transition from feudalism to modern statehood. As the old feudal order collapsed, private armies and protection rackets filled the power vacuum, eventually evolving into the sophisticated criminal organization known today. Among the various Cosa Nostra families, none achieved the notable notoriety and power of the Corleonesi clan from the small town of Corleone. Under the ruthless leadership of Salvatore Toto Riina, the Corleonesi transformed from a relatively minor rural family into the dominant force in Sicilian organized crime during the 1970s and 1980s. Riina, known as the Beast for his extraordinary brutality, assumed control of the Corleonesi in 1974 and immediately began implementing a strategy of violent expansion. Unlike traditional mafia leaders who preferred to operate in the shadows, Riina embraced terror as a tool of control, systematically eliminating rivals, witnesses, and anyone who opposed his organization's interests. The early 1980s witnessed the bloodiest period in Sicilian mafia history, known as the Second Mafia War. Riina orchestrated a campaign of unprecedented violence, targeting established Palermo families including the Incerillos, Bontadis, and other traditional powers. Between 1981 and 1983, an estimated 1,000 people died as the Corleonesi eliminated their competition through assassinations, bombings, and mass executions. Riina's capture in 1993, after 23 years in hiding, symbolized the beginning of the Cosa Nostra's decline. His successor, Bernardo Provenzano, attempted to return to traditional low-profile methods, but the damage was irreversible. Modern Sicily, while still affected by organized crime, no longer experiences the systematic violence that characterized the Riina era. Which of these mafia families did you know about? Share in the comments and click the cards on screen for more.